From the remnants of ghost towns long since abandoned, where it's told restless spirits tied to relics of the past still roam, to popular public expanses holding a number of restored structures alongside all manner of associated paranormal activity. Are you prepared to explore our third list of some of the most haunted state parks in the US? Number 5. Heritage Hills State Historical Park. Heritage Hills State Historical Park, located off of South Webster Avenue in ALLOUEZ, out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, is a 56-acre open-air museum featuring 26 historical and reconstructed structures from the state's extensive past, some of which are endangered buildings that were actually moved from elsewhere for preservation. Historically, predating this museum, property the park now sits upon was utilized for a prison labor farm and orchard. However, construction of a bridge crossing the Fox River would cut said farm off from the prison, and its lands would be acquired under the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. In 1972, the department would approve the design of a historical park. In another meeting the same year, they would settle on the name of Heritage Hills State Historical Park, and in 1977, the expanse would officially open to the public, with over 25 buildings and 15 acres of land added over the following 2 decades. Most recently, in 2006, the Betsy Hendrickson and Luciana Hitch Education Center was constructed, allowing for year-round educational programs, while accommodating all manner of meetings, receptions, and events within its plentiful space. Heritage Hills State Park remains open into the present, preserving its many structures along with over 9,000 artifacts and a wealth of materials pertaining to the history of northeastern Wisconsin as a whole. Over the years, a range of ghost stories have formed around this weathered park expanse, with local legend attributing resident paranormal activity to restless spirits tied to its extensive collection, and both staff and visitors have told of orbs and strange mists captured in photography, of light spied floating around buildings that are closed and locked up, and of disembodied footsteps and voices heard from empty spaces. A handful of accounts tell of encounters with full-bodied apparitions in clothing ranging the old structure's eras, many appearing lost or confused, possibly due to the relocation of their former abodes, while others have described run-ins with ominous shadowy figures, or with entities in period dress that appear so real they've been mistaken for actors before disappearing into thin air. Lastly, several informal investigations of Heritage Hill have yielded high EMF levels and chilling EVPs, while other reports detail objects moving on their own, doors that slam shut dangerously close to fingers, and the constant feelings of being watched or of being followed. Number 4. Moore State Park. Moore State Park, located off of Sawmill Road, out of the town of Paxton, Massachusetts, is an infinitely popular 737-acre public recreation expanse, offering a range of trails, remnants of historical buildings, a restored sawmill, Ames Pond, waterfalls, mill chutes, and more. Historically, some of the first of said mills constructed through the region were built in as early as 1747, and over time, future park grounds alone would play home to at least 5 18th and 19th century watermills, most of which that were powered off of the Turkey Hill Brook, which cascades around 90 feet over a 400-foot run. In 1930, one Florence Morton would make purchase of the old Ames Mill property and would remodel the sawhouse into a tea house, after which construction of a Swiss chalet and planting of the park's now iconic azaleas and rhododendrons would begin. And in 1965, the whole of the expanse was purchased by the state of Massachusetts, who would open it as Moore State Park in honor of Willard Moore, who in 1774 was among the mob that stormed the Worcester courthouse in order to protest heavy English taxation of their goods. To date, several remnants of the old milling community remain, including its tavern, its triphammer quarry, and its schoolhouse, which is enclosed by the Morton home. Moore State Park remains open into the present, offering a range of options in hiking, canoeing, fishing, and cross-country skiing, alongside plentiful picnic sites, interpretive programs, and even occasional concerts. While it's unknown who or what is responsible for the bulk of Moore's purported paranormal activity, those who have frequented the expanse have reported extreme temperature fluctuations, fog that descends upon the area alone, eerie whispers from the trees, and the constant feelings of being watched, followed, or even of being brushed up against by something unseen. While several informal investigations have yielded orbs and half-formed silhouettes in photography, constant malfunctions with equipment, and instances of teams' possessions going missing only to turn up later in odd places. One more popular and chilling legend tied to Moore surrounds the mill house just down from the pond, and tells of how its premises is haunted by the spirits of 3 former mill workers, who all took their own lives by way of hanging. To date, many passing this location have described sighting the 3 workers' phantom bodies dangling from the building, each offering soul-piercing stares for a few tense seconds before fading away. Number 3. Mohican State Park. Mohican State Park, located off of Ohio State Route 3 on the south shore of Pleasant Hill Lake, just 5 miles to the south of Loudonville, Ohio, is a popular 1,110-acre public recreation expanse that's centered by a 5-mile stretch of the Clear Fork branch of the Mohican River, which offers some of the state's best options in canoeing, tubing, and swimming. Historically, in 1928, the Ohio Division of Forestry would acquire local lands accumulating to around 4,500 acres in order to establish Mohican Memorial State Forest. Around and through the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps would landscape forest grounds while planting trees and officializing trails, and following the formation of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in 1949, an early park would be established off Mohican Memorial Forest lands as Clear Fork State Park. Over the years, these rec grounds would grow wildly in popularity. In 1966, their name would be altered to Mohican State Park in order to avoid confusion between its locale and that of Clear Fork Reservoir out of Mansfield. And in 1974, the Mohican Lodge and Conference Center was completed, offering unparalleled accommodations for weddings, vacations, reunions, and all manner of events. Mohican State Park remains open into the present, boasting 13 miles of hiking trails within its bounds alone, and 32 miles into adjacent state forests, as well as breathtaking campsites, nature programs, tours, events, and, according to legend, a wealth of haunted activity, with those adventuring about reporting extreme cold spots on hot days, shadowy figures that stalk the living, and encounters with a spectral man in ancient native attire, a dangerous spirit who some claim is always searching for his next victim. Within park bounds, Big Lions and Little Lions Falls are surrounded in several persistent stories, each pertaining to individuals by the name of Lions, but completely unrelated. One such tale tells the falls are named after Paul Lyons, a self-reliant pioneer whose tombstone can actually be viewed adjacent to the trail leading up the 80-foot Big Lions over Clear Fork Gorge. As this fable goes, Paul was a reclusive man who lived alone in the forest with his milk cow, and one stormy night, after realizing the cow had wandered off, he attempted to track it, listening for its bell on the winds. He followed the distant chiming up until he'd reached the edge of the waterfall, where, in the gale, he lost his footing and fell to his death. In the present, on dark, stormy nights, it's told that if one listens closely, they can still hear the cowbell chiming, and the spectral silhouette of a man waving a lantern about has been spied atop the cliffs. A second tale tells of one Thomas Lyons, a brutal highwayman widely recognized as the ugliest man of his time, whose claim to infamy was his legendary necklace made of 99 different human tongues, and his subsequent boast to find 100th to complete his work of art. Before Thomas could accomplish this feat, however, it's said he was ambushed by a cave on the nearby old stagecoach road and was killed in combat. And to date, several harrowing accounts tell of encounters with his enraged spirit, forever searching for its 100th tongue. Number 2. Babcock State Park. Babcock State Park, located off of Babcock Road along New River Gorge in Fayette County out of Clifftop, West Virginia, is a 4,127-acre park expanse named in honor of Edward Vose Babcock, a prominent lumber industrialist that served as Pittsburgh's mayor from 1918 to 1922. Historically, Babcock State Park was initially established on July 1st of 1937 amidst the Great Depression as a public works program, and from 1934 to the year of its opening, Civilian Conservation Corps workers would landscape its bounds, establishing a number of trails and wreck sites. Sadly, early extensive logging of the region coupled with widespread wildfires had left a scar on the lands, but by the mid-1950s, green had once again returned to the hillsides, and streams were again capable of supporting populations of trout. Through the 1960s, a number of new facilities were established on Babcock grounds, including 40 campsites, the 18-acre Boley Lake, and 13 additional cabins. Through the 1970s, a modern in-ground swimming pool was constructed, and in 1976, the iconic Glade Creek grist mill was completed off of parts salvaged from two older mills from across West Virginia. Babcock State Park remains open into the present, offering 52 campsites, 28 cabins, a gift shop, more than 20 miles of hiking trails, and numerous options in angling, swimming, and more. Additionally and notably, the Glade Creek grist mill is recognized as a living, working monument to the 500 or more mills that previously peppered the state. Over its many years, Babcock has earned a dark reputation for its purported supernatural infestations and ghostly activity, with those frequenting its bounds reporting orbs in strange forms captured in photography, objects spied moving on their own, strange EVPs heard in phone calls and recordings, and the constant feelings of being watched or followed by something unseen. The most famous fable surrounding Babcock tells of how on April 29th of 1996, Reverend James Michael Flippo and his wife Cheryl rented Cabin 13 as a private getaway. Chillingly, emergency services would later be called to the cabin in the middle of the night to a brutal scene. As the Reverend described it, he had been awakened from slumber suddenly to a man standing over him with a piece of firewood in his hands, and before he could react, was stricken across the head by the stranger, which rendered him unconscious. As his account continued, when he rose from this state, he beheld his wife, who'd been beaten so severely her brain matter was visible from across the room, after which he sprinted to the camp offices to call 911 for help. Unfortunately for the good Reverend's story, it was later discovered Flippo had been involved in an affair, had just taken a $100,000 life insurance policy out on his wife, was covered in what appeared to be defensive wounds, and sported a head injury not sufficient enough to knock out a baby, much less a full-grown man, resulting in him being charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life. Disturbingly, many who have braved a night in Cabin 13 have told of being awakened to the disembodied sounds of something heavy hitting the floor, or to the terrifying entity of a man standing above their bed, who disappears when lights are turned on or when a scream is uttered, and several park officials have described hearing blood-chilling shrieks emanating from within, when the domicile is supposed to be vacant for the night. Number 1. Oil Creek State Park. Oil Creek State Park, located off of State Park Road and spread over the Cherry Tree, Complanter, and Oil Creek townships in Pennsylvania, is a 6,250-acre recreational expanse that sits just adjacent to the Drake Well Museum, which preserves the site of the first successful commercial oil well in the United States, as well as its first resulting boomtown. Historically, the slowly evolving community of Titusville, which sat just to the north of future Oil Creek State Park grounds, was settled in 1796. By the early 1850s, the region would boast 17 sawmills and would claim lumber as its primary economy, and through the remainder of the 1850s, Seneca Oil Company manager Colonel Edwin L. Drake would begin drilling on a leased chunk of land just south of Titusville, on which in 1859 he would strike black gold through his first successful local well. As soon as the word caught wind, the local oil industry would boom. Between 1862 and 1868 alone, 8 new refineries were constructed, and while the oil game would peak through the 1880s, astonishingly, to this day, there are still a few wells throughout the park that remain in full operation. Over time, the oil industry would slow, with lumber once again replacing it as the major local economy until most of the surrounding hills and valleys were cleared out, and through the 1930s, the Civilian Conservation Corps would work to revive the area, planting countless forests while constructing state roads, bridges, and park facilities, work which continues into the present. Oil Creek State Park remains open to the public, offering trails, picnic sites, and options in canoeing, angling, cross-country skiing, and the Oil Creek and Titusville Railroad, a diesel tourist excursion train that runs guests on an educational ride over park grounds. Local legend has long painted the whole of Oil Creek as haunted, quite simply, by the souls of its former residents, with those frequenting its bounds reporting disembodied voices and footsteps along various trails. The constant feelings of being watched or even of being stalked by a presence unseen, odd electronic malfunctions and spontaneous battery death, and orbs and strange mists that are captured in photography and video. The Petroleum Cemetery, which was established through the mid-1800s for the town of Petroleum Center, which is now a ghost town, is included in park bounds, and those who have braved it, especially after dark, have described encounters with the entity of a woman who legend tells hanged herself long ago, and whose manifestation is often sighted walking the road in a white dress or wandering about graveyard grounds. Ironically, the Miller Farm Cemetery, another burying grounds included on park lands, is also rumored to be stalked by a woman in white, albeit a different entity entirely. And over this plot, many have reported strange red flashes of light and orbs that float through the area, as well as certain markers that seemingly glow green after dark. A final, rather disturbing diatribe tells that mid-oil boom in December of 1888, right along a stretch of what was at the time called the Old Oil Creek Highway, which ran from Oil City along Oil Creek through Petroleum Center and onward to both Titusville and Pleasantville. One Doc Haggerty was en route to the Pleasantville magazine with a wagon filled to the brim with 1,400 pounds of nitroglycerin. The last person to see the good doctor alive spotted him around 20 minutes preceding a violent explosion that shook the ground and echoed the length of the valley 10 times over. While small bits of Haggerty's horse and wagon were eventually located, not one atom of the man himself was ever recovered, and local legend tells that on cold December evenings at random times, his last resounding boom can still be heard and felt across the region, and a handful of accounts detail encounters with an old horse-drawn carriage driven by a man in aged attire, believed to be the specter of Doc Haggerty, determined to complete his final mission from the other side. Taking its fascinating history into account and coupling it with such a formidable assortment of chilling ghost stories and purported paranormal encounters, we felt Oil Creek was the perfect choice as this list's most haunted state park in the US. Thanks for joining us on our third list of some of the most chillingly haunted state parks in the US of A. If you enjoyed our histories and tales of terror, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share it with anyone you think could use a good scare. Good night.